And that was the interrogation of Kristopher Love. I have with me the one and only Bob Bianchi, who is here via Skype, although he feels like he's so close to me at all times. Thanks for being here, Bob.
Julie, I'm breathless.
In every way, you're breathless. And so let me ask you this, because we were talking a lot about this interrogation, and I heard you talking about Detective Barnes the other day with the utmost of admiration, and I said I could only dream as a prosecutor of having him as the lead detective on my case. But let me just ask you, a jury knows that this young man sat for 20 hours of interrogation. How does that impact the jury's kind of decision-making when it comes to whether or not this was a voluntary and willing confession?
I don't think it affects it at all, Julie. I get your point. There are cases. In fact, I had one that went to the state Supreme Court on a 25-hour interrogation when I was the county prosecutor. But in that case, the kid was crying. The kid was clearly physically disturbed. The detectives did their job and they kept going, but there was a question as to whether or not the confession itself legally was admissible because of the amount of time and stress that the kid was going through. You don't see that with this guy. You see him kind of just rolling with it. He's got his weed shirt on, his little pink, soft thing there. The cop is giving him, the Detective Barnes is giving him food. So I don't think it's going to affect the opinion of him at all. And he did do a textbook excellent job as a detective. I have seen some really bad statement taken. He not only was good, he not only established a rapport, he used his common sense, he kept the guy talking, and he talked himself into a guilty verdict.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Look, I'm trying to be devil's advocate, but I think he did an incredible job, and I think it was a pink Snuggie that he's wearing, which I think he seems all too comfortable in terms of his discussion with Detective Barnes. What I want to do now is go to the cross-examination of Cortes. I was watching this again last night, and I thought the defense did a fantastic job of bringing out some questionable answers from this witness. Let's take a look.
Feeling good.
Now, I don't know if it's the draw from this defense attorney, but I thought his questioning was fantastic. Bob, one of the things that stood out in my mind is there's nothing better when you're cross-examining a witness that you get them to admit to lying about that of which they just testified to. And that's what she did. She basically admitted to lying about the reason she came forward. What do you think about, or what do you make of her testimony?
Well, we say when we're prosecutors, right, when you sleep with dogs, you catch fleas, and you just have to make a determination as to how many fleas you're going to catch with any particular witness. So, of course, I would be having a very stone, calm face. I'd probably be turning to my trial partner and making believe that there was nothing going on. But inside, I'd be in complete turmoil that she just admitted that she lied in front of the jury. But, Julie, let's be honest here. The case is really surrounding a number of pieces of data points, including the fact that the vehicle being given and all the other data points in Love's statement and the motive in the case. So you don't like it, but it's not fatal in my mind.
I agree with you. I think that, to me, this makes probably more of a difference when it comes to the sentencing phase, because I think that the jury is going to be so bothered that Cortes is getting away with 35 years that they're going to have a whole lot of trouble of finding the death penalty for Kristopher Love.
Well, Julie, to your point, I agree, but in the end, this guy's getting the death penalty. 2 data points here. She's getting the break with the 35-year sentence, and the mastermind, Brenda Delgado, because of this extradition from Mexico, is not facing the death penalty. And I was just saying yesterday to Gene Rossi that if I were the defense attorney, that would be what my sentencing phase argument is about. How is it possible the more culpable person, Brenda Delgado, and this Cortes get off, and they want you to put a needle in my client's arm and execute him? That's an argument I'd make, but in the end, he's the one who pulled the trigger.
Yeah, look, I mean, and I agree with you. I think he's done a terrific job, at least poking holes. You're right. I don't think he's going to be poking holes enough to get this guy out of it. But I think he's talented enough, if anyone can, to try at least to get one juror not to go with the death penalty. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
Children.
And this is the testimony of Bonnie Jameson, the mother of the deceased. And Bob Bianchi, I just want to, talk to you briefly. One of the toughest things as a defense attorney is making sure you don't raise your hands too much to object when the mother of the deceased is testifying, even though a lot of what she's testifying to is probably not relevant in determining kind of the guilt or innocence of the defendant. But you kind of want to keep kind of your mouth shut to a degree because you don't want to insult the jury.
Well, Julie, you said something that we've been kind of kibitzing about on this case for a while. You have the victim's pictures up there. I'm just fascinated by this. You have victim impact testimony, we call it, with the mother and the friends coming in the guilt phase. That usually comes in the sentencing phase. Well, obviously, these things are permitted in the state of Texas, but it can have a dramatic effect on the emotions of the jurors when they're hearing it. That's why it's typically done in the sentencing phase of the case. But she was compelling, and I could only think when I was listening to her testimony, she was testifying about how the daughter called her up all excited about the new boyfriend, and it seemed like it was serious. I get goosebumps right now when I'm thinking about it. And in her mind, she was probably, as a mom, thinking about marriage and grandkids, and to have these animals take all that away.
I think about the 2 hours that she had to wait, or her family had to wait till the husband came home in order for her to find out that her daughter had been killed. It's unbearable to think about. Let's go back in and take another look.
So well.
And again, heartbreaking testimony from Bonnie Jameson, who is the mother of Kendra Hatcher. And one of the things you were talking about, Bob, is thinking about the picture of the deceased next to every single person who testified. And if I were a juror, I don't know if I could even listen. I think I'd be more attentive to the picture of this beautiful woman that was killed at the prime of her life. And so I did notice that the defense did object at one point to relevancy, but one wonders if perhaps prior to this witness taking the stand, they might have done a motion in limine to maybe limit what the mother would be testifying to and save that for a later phase.
Yeah, it's hard to say. By the way, we actually had the great people at the Law and Crime Network yesterday try to find the filings of any motions to at least preclude those pictures. We didn't find anything. We were directed to the lawyers for any further information. But with respect to the testimony, just so that the viewers understand this, when I say victim impact testimony, in the guilt phase of a capital murder case, it's supposed to be about proving the person committed a crime and that crime qualifies to move to the next part of the case, which is the sentencing phase, to do capital murder or to execute. So the mother's testimony really didn't bear on the relevancy at all as to whether the persons or people did it or didn't do it. And, Texas is a fast state like Florida. They go in there and they are quick with the death penalty. Jersey, New York, Virginia. We've been talking to Linda Kinney Bodden, all sorts of people about the testimony and these pictures. And around here, you would not get away with that. And it would be interesting to see if these issues have ever been brought to the United States Supreme Court, because like you just said, Julie, my last point, how can you expect jurors to not use passion, prejudice? The judge tells them, don't be impassioned, don't be prejudiced.
As they're staring at the pictures of this beautiful woman both before and after she became a dentist. I couldn't agree with you more. We're going to go back into the courtroom. Now we're going to actually hear additional heartbreaking testimony, and this is from the person who's in the center in many ways of it all, and that is Ricardo Penanagua. That is the actual boyfriend of Kendra Hatcher, who kind of was surrounded by Brenda Delgado, who was obsessed with him. Let's take a look. And that is the testimony of Ricardo Penanagua. That is the boyfriend of Kendra Hatcher and was the obsession of one of the three individuals that was involved in this murder, Brenda Delgado. I'm here with Bob Bianchi. Thank you for being here, Bob, again. And one of the things I want to talk about is, one of the benefits of hearing from this young man, besides the fact that he can establish for the jury the knowledge of Brenda Delgado and kind of the odd times that they would see each other, which he thought it was just coincident. Turns out it was actually her stalking him. But I think naturally a juror, when they hear about this case, may think that he is in some way involved. And I think by hearing from him, one of the things we walk away from, especially this young man, is that he had absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with the death of this young woman.
You know, Julie, to the point that you made before, this is a witness that actually has relevant information. And I couldn't agree with you more that it is important for the prosecutor to let them see him and understand that this guy was an innocent victim and another collateral consequence to the animalistic behavior of these three cowards that killed this beautiful woman with a motive that's as long as history knows it, right? Jealousy and greed. So just have him get up there and talk about, look at him, he's a nice young man, and he must blame himself in some regard. Not that he had anything to do with the crime, but that somebody that he had been close with, Brenda Delgado, a former girlfriend, would do such a horrible, dastardly, hateful thing. No one walks out of this not feeling somewhat responsible.
I absolutely agree with you, and it always blows my mind that Kristopher Love did this for a little money and a little drugs. We're going to be back in a few minutes, and we're going to take a break. Thanks for being here. And that's the summation talking about one of the main witnesses. That would be Cortes, the cooperating witness, who is the getaway driver. I'm back here with Bob Bianchi briefly. Bob, one of the things they have to do, they have to sell two things. They have to sell Cortes, and they have to sell the defendant's interrogation. Are they doing a good job with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're doing what you do when you have a cooperating witness that takes the stand and has some dirt on them, and like you noted before, admits, which is brutal, that they lied actually in front of the jury during the course of the trial. You got to be really, really, really careful before you put somebody like that on, but she's doing what you need to do damage control.
Yeah, I'd like to look. I mean, I think that the prosecution rebuttal did a stronger job than the prosecution initial summation, and maybe because they had to, because I think the defense's arguments were fantastic. But yeah, one of the things I think that as prosecutors you have to sell is that the only way sometimes to find out kind of what went on behind closed doors is to bring in one of the participants to let you, the jury, know kind of what happened. And the only way you're ever going to learn is if we kind of sell one of those individuals to you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, birds of a feather flock together. And, all the people that we have as witnesses aren't necessarily the most upstanding citizens in the United States of America. They're criminals. That's how we get the data. And that data is useful, and we use it all the time as prosecutors in order to build bigger cases against more culpable parties. So, the prosecutor had to make a strategic decision. Do I go with a cooperating witness that was the getaway driver who knew that this was going on, and then go after the guy that was the trigger man? There's a no-brainer there with regard to who they're going to use as a witness.
Was that the situation, or is it possible the other situation, which is who's the first person in the door who wants to cooperate? It becomes sometimes a battle of that as well.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what we say, especially in the federal system, the first one in the door. But as you know, prosecutors aren't going to trade a shooter for some lesser character. So in other words, if the shooter gets there first and says, hey, I want to cooperate against the getaway driver, no bueno as far as the prosecutor is concerned. I want the shooter, and I want the mastermind. So they made the smart selection here.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you. And although, again, I agree with you that she lied, and she lied about many things, I think the parts that are most important are the parts that are not just from her own testimony, but that are corroborated from the other evidence. The gun that was recovered, the surveillance video, the phone records, and all those things seem to support her version of events versus the defendant's version of events.
Julie, excellent point. I mean, before any prosecutor worth their salt would put somebody like this up there, they would know by definition that their credibility is going to be assailed. So they want to have individual corroborative data points to support the testimony of even aligned witnesses, which you're seeing here. So, yeah, I mean, that's exactly what the prosecutor is spelling out here.
Okay, so I think we're going to go back into the courtroom. We're going to take another look at the prosecutor's closing arguments. Let's take a look. Okay, and again, we're taking a look at the summations of the prosecutor while we are on verdict watch. We're here with Bob Bianchi, and she's kind of talking through the, to the jury and going through each piece of the evidence and how it is supported with regards to what Cortes says and how what the defendant eventually admits to, which he does admit to robbing her, he just doesn't admit to being the shooter. And she basically is walking the jury through the fact that there's no way it could have happened the way he described it happening, and the reason it didn't is because he's not being completely forthright as to who the trigger man is.
Right, common case, Julie. The defendant's admitting, but he's mitigating, he's deflecting, he's trying to say, I'm not an animal, I'm not a monster. It was just a robbery gone bad. That wasn't what my intention was. This is not an uncommon thing at all. And the prosecutor is putting together and sewing piece by piece together. And Brenda Delgado's the key. She's the motive. She's involved in this. I mean, do we believe, as a matter of common sense, and I have my glasses on, Julie, because in the chat room they were asking where are they, so I put them on for them. But
where your glasses are.
Yeah. But do we really believe that Brenda Delgado, who knew that they were going on a vacation to Mexico and who was following him around and stalking him and obsessed with him, said to these two people who are definitely involved, they're all involved in this together, whatever it is, and she says, hey, do me a favor, go rob her. Go take her ID. Is that believable from the standpoint of common sense?
I agree. Look, I'm sure there were many discussions between them, and I can only be a fly on the wall to imagine the absolute ludicrous conversations that went on before this transpired. It's amazing that they were able to pull it off. It's not amazing that they got caught, because thankfully, in a sense, they did such an incredibly sloppy job. I think the thing that stood out in my head is the fact that she didn't realize that there would be a video camera in the parking garage after being there a million times to stake out the place. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. And you just were listening to the defense summations on the people, or the Texas v. Kristopher Love. I'm here with Bob Bianchi, and one of the things, look, I think he did a fantastic job, and one of the things he does is he lets the jury know that he does not have the burden to prove the defendant not guilty. He keeps the jury understanding that it is the people that must prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. And the way they must prove it is potentially through the testimony of Cortes. And so I think he does a great job at kind of drilling that into the jury's head, so to speak. What are your thoughts?
I like that he used some law there. I was just a little confused when he said the judge will charge or instruct you that you have to believe her as being truthful. Now, these laws are typically the same in most states when you're reading a jury charge. I'm not 100% certain that that was an accurate statement of the law. I was expecting the prosecutor to get up at that point in time. Some states make you wait until after the actual whole summation, because you can believe part of Crystal's testimony, none of Crystal's testimony, all of Crystal's testimony, in conjunction with the statement of the defendant and the other evidence in the case, and come to a guilty conclusion. So I like to use the law. I'm just curious what you think. I'll throw it back to you, Julie.
It's funny you said, look, here's the truth. In New York, usually what you basically, the law is that an accomplice's testimony is valid as long as there's some corroboration of that witness's testimony and that you believe that testimony. Obviously, it's true that you don't have to believe every single thing a witness says in order to find an individual guilty. And with that said, sometimes if someone's lying about one thing, it makes it more likely they're lying about everything. But you're absolutely right. I agree with you that she is not the only witness in this case. The defendant is his own worst enemy in this case because he admits to the robbery. And that, coupled with the surveillance video, seems to indicate that he was kind of working alone when it came to the actual shooting. One thing I will say, though, that he does very well, and I think it will help in the sentencing phase, and I hate to say that I'm assuming we're going there, but I assume we're going there, is that he almost is able, in a really incredible way, to minimize the shooter's role in this case by making it as though this had been planned way before he ever came into existence in this case, and that it would have happened regardless of Kristopher Love's involvement. And I think that also may go a long way when it comes to the death penalty.
I'll retort as follows. Okay.
Go for it.
Yeah, that's a good point that you're bringing up, that's what he's doing. but it can also have the effect of really agitating the jury. Okay, in the sentencing phase, they may sit there and say, how dare you talk? We all get that Brenda Delgado is no good. We all get that she was out there trying to find somebody to do harm, but that's a double-edged argument for him, right? Because the person she found is sitting, that he's representing, that you see on the screen. That lawyer's right there is representing the person that Delgado finally got to pull the trigger. Now, this case comes down to a simple fact. Is it a robbery gone bad, or was this a purposeful attempt to kill Ms. Hatcher? And when you put Brenda Delgado in the centerpiece of this, you have got all that you need to show motive to kill, as opposed to an armed robbery gone awry. So I don't think this argument is helpful to him in the sentencing phase.
So we shall see, and I think they would have had a nice job had they used you as the prosecutor, certainly for the rebuttal part of this this case, Bob Bianchi. We're going to go to break, and we'll be right back. And that's Ricardo Peniagua, and he's explaining on the stand, first, his original relationship with Brenda Delgado, who will eventually be on trial in Texas for this murder, and explaining how the relationship he had with the deceased and how they didn't know each other, which is trying to get to the bottom of the fact that Brenda had been stalking him. He probably didn't realize it. I think there were times when he would see her when he was jogging and didn't realize that she was there because she knew he would be there. I know, Bob, we spoke before, Mr. Bianchi, about the fact that this is not just a witness who's testifying to get emotion from the jury. This is a witness that the jury needs to hear from because he ties together the reason, in a sense, unfortunately, why we end up with this trial.
Yeah, he's the motive evidence, you know, in the case. The relationship that, excuse me, that he had with Delgado previously, the new relationship with Ms. Hatcher, and obviously he's the guy in the middle. You know, Julie, I look at his face, and when he's testifying, I don't know the man, but you just see like anguish in the brow area, whatever. And here he is being followed, being stalked, and she's not going to have it that he's going on this trip, that he took her to meet his parents, and she was like, this is it. And that is the impetus. That is the thing that starts this whole sick, you know, cabal moving forward to kill Ms. Hatcher. So he is an extremely relevant and compelling witness.
I find it amazing in a way that Brenda Delgado, in a sense, was able to hide her obsession with him. You know, I hate to say, but most of these cases we see kind of evidence from the get-go of the spurned lover expressing, you know, their desire to be with someone via text messages. She kept it quiet from him. She literally, you know, kept it to herself and instead, you know, began the planning phase to make sure that he didn't end up with anyone. I mean, she had started with, I think, a girlfriend before and then continued with this one. And I find it amazing that she was really able to, you know, I don't know how manipulative or what a mastermind she is, that she really kept it away from Ricky. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, you know, actually, Julie, you brought up something I never even thought of. Like back in the day when I was dating prior to social media and all this technology, the good old-fashioned way when I was being stalked was just like, you know, break the guy's windows or you know, or
I hope
you know,
that didn't happen, Bob. I hope that
oh, well,
didn't
actually,
happen.
listen, we've all had these strange things happen in our lives, but and in fact, that did happen. But the point was that there, like anything else in the technological world, there was an ability to have distance. And you couldn't be stalked so easily. But today with the technology, she can follow the cell phone, apparently. She can follow GPS where he's going or where she's going. And it's not just her. This is happening all over the place. Sure. So there's no sense of security in any given place for people that are being preyed upon by a maniac, a lunatic like this Delgado woman.
But and I hear you, but the craziest thing is that he had no idea. You know, as far as he was concerned, it was an amicable breakup. You know, when they saw each other, they chatted. There didn't seem to be the animosity that you expect with, you know, women don't and men don't necessarily go as far as broken windows, but they express themselves. They express that desire to be with someone. And so this is unusual because she really played it so close to the vest, which in a sense enabled her to kind of commit this crime. And that seems unusual in many of these type of cases.
Yeah, I mean, It's usually a little bit more reactive, a little more volatile. The boyfriend, the ex-boyfriend, would have gotten a sensibility, I think is what you're saying, that there's something awry here. But she's kind of lying in wait with a smile on her face as she's taking a dagger and putting it in his back, and, you know, trying to plan doing that to Miss Hatcher. It takes a special kind of someone to do something like that, which makes the best argument that the defense has in the case of Love, that this sick, twisted girl, Delgado, should be the one that's facing the death penalty, and she's not.
And she's not, exactly. And all because she fled. The only reason she's not facing the death penalty is because she chose to flee. We're going to go back into the courtroom, and we're going to listen to the testimony of Crystal Cortes. Take a look. And that's the testimony of Crystal Cortes talking about the planning of the murder of Kendra Hatcher. You know, one of the things I just want to make clear to those watching is that the reason that Brenda Delgado, who is the individual that is kind of the center of all this, the one who put this in motion, is avoiding the death penalty is because she fled to Mexico after this incident happened. And the only way they would return her is if the United States guaranteed that she would not get the death penalty. Bob, you know, that is something the jury is going to know about. In fact, the jury already knows specifically that Crystal Cortes is not getting the death penalty. And, you know, we talk a lot about the idea, is the jury going to be influenced at the end of the day? And I hate that we keep assuming, but I admit that I'm assuming we're going to sentencing phase. But when and if we get there, is that jury going to be influenced by the fact that, in a sense, Brenda Delgado got a break by fleeing responsibility for this?
I think it's an argument that the defense is going to successfully argue it well.
Right.
But at the end of the day, the prosecutor is going to get up and say, the fact is, this man is the one who had the gun. This man, she couldn't do anything, Delgado, without him. And if he wasn't the one that pumped around into her and killed this beautiful woman here, we all would not have met. The jurors, you, us, the judge, the whole thing. So don't make any mistake about the idea in your brain that what the defense attorney wants you to believe, that this is some like choir boy here that was like innocent and shouldn't get capital murder. He should go down. Now, the fact that Delgado isn't getting the death penalty, or Cortes, may be repulsive to certain jurors, but nevertheless, it's not going to be something in my mind in a state like Texas, and I think you have to take that into consideration, where they're going to say, fancifully, you know what, those two got off, so let's let this guy get off too. They're going to look to bring justice to this victim's family. Just my point of view.
You know what, you're absolutely right. One of the things that keeps standing out in my head is this is Texas, it's not New York, it's not New Jersey, and I think a jury is going to view things very differently than
Julie,
they would potentially in New York.
Julie, do we have a second to bring up one point that I think is amazing to me
one
as a lawyer?
One quick point, and then we have to go to break.
Like this whole thing about the casuality of it all, and, you know, oh, we can't do it now, let's go for some burgers and some shakes.
The fast food aspect of this.
Craziness.
It blows my mind when she talks about her child every 2 minutes, how she had to take her child to go get food. We'll be right back on that note. And that's the interrogation of Kristopher Love. And when I leave today, you're going to be hearing from Stacey Delicat, who's going to be hosting. Bob, any parting words before I leave you today, or you leave me?
Julie Rendelman, it was an inestimable pleasure to, at the last moment, be asked to come on to be your guest on the Law and Crime Network. You did an amazing job. The questions were scintillating, crisp, to the point, overwhelming. I don't know what to say.
I'm trying not to tear up. It's very difficult for me not to. I feel like every time I'm in trouble, you always help me out. And in all honesty, you get me through it, and I appreciate it so much. For those watching, we are in verdict watch. We don't know if the jury's going to come back today, tomorrow, or the next day. But stay tuned for all the coverage here at Law and Crime Network.